Hello Mrs. Clinton, my name is Max. I'll be interviewing you today for a required presentation from my English 103 class.
Hi Max, I'm glad to be here.
Thanks. So, let's get right to it. Do you or do you not support international trade?
Well Max, of course I support international and free trade. I was the chief advocate for the Trans-Pacific Partnership, a trade deal that will create a new high standard for multilateral free trade. Unfortunately, I think that the Trans-Pacific Partnership in its current form poses too many risks. I would support an international free trade deal if, and only if, it would push the bar very high, and combine strongness with fairness. So I would say that I do support free international trade, Max.
Okay, so how do you respond to voting records that indicate you have in fact voted against the North American and Central American free trade agreements?
You see Max, I only voted against those trade agreements because I thought that they could do better. If they supported a trade prosecutor to enforce those certain trade agreements, I would have voted for them, just as I have voted to support free trade with Oman, Singapore, Vietnam, and Chile. I want free trade to benefit American citizens as well as our trading partners. For that reason, any agreement I vote yes on must be near perfect.
Thanks Hillary. It seems as though you really are for free international trade, and would keep aligned with what you are promising. I appreciate the answer. Now, let's tackle a different issue. Something I feel like a lot of Americans might be passionate about: legalizing marijuana.
You know Max, I have always been for reducing teen and adult drug use, and am requiring chemical resellers to certify against methamphetamine use, in combination with anti-drug legislation.
That's great Mrs. Clinton, but I asked about legalizing recreational marijuana, not your policy on drugs as a whole.
Okay Max. I want to preface this by saying that I am an ethical Christian, physically aloof from the counterculture. With that said, I don't think legalizing recreational marijuana will work. I mean, I hear the same debate. I hear it in my country. It is not likely to work. I don't think you can legalize marijuana for legal possession.
But Bernie Sanders and some other Democratic candidates are quite open to the idea of legalizing recreational marijuana.
Oh, well in that case, you know, states are the laboratories of democracy. We have at least 2 states experimenting with legalization right now. Let's see how they do and then reconvene later when there is more evidence. I am open to the idea, but later.
Thank you Mrs. Clinton. It seems as though you will probably never be for legalizing marijuana recreationally. I'll let my colleagues handle the rest of this interview.
Hi Mrs. Clinton, my name is Sara. I'd like to ask you about Social Security. Go ahead and ask away. What is your stance on Social Security? Well, Sara, I fully support Social Security. The most important fight we're going to have is defending it against continuing Republican efforts to privatize it. We have a lot of women on Social Security, particularly widowed and single women who didn't make a lot of money during their careers, and they are impoverished, and they need more help from the Social Security system. I will focus on helping the people who need it the most. I'm going to look for ways to make sure that Social Security is solvent into the future. What have you done in the past for Social Security? How have your views changed? In the 2007 Democratic debate, I supported Social Security and advocated for a bipartisan commission with fiscal responsibility. The things that could make Social Security solvent. I supported President Bill Clinton's idea of avoiding drastic benefit cuts as well, and not to drain resources from the system in the name of saving it. I believe in Social Security as a family protection system. As you can see, I'm all about enhancing Social Security rather than privatizing it. Great. I think you sound confident in your ability to help Social Security. How about your plans to tackle some income inequality issues? Bill and I have been very blessed. Neither of us came from wealthy families and we've worked really hard our entire lives. I want to make sure every single person in this country has the same opportunities that he and I had. A good education, job training, and then good jobs. What have you done in the past to help counter income inequality? Throughout the years I have co-sponsored the Fair Minimum Wage Act of 2007, the Economic Security Act of 2003, and the Paycheck Fairness Act. I am ready to protect against discrimination and other forms of inequality regarding payment of wages. In 2007, I proposed the Ready to Learn Act, which was meant to give grants towards children's educational programs that serve those in poverty first and foremost. Thanks, Mrs. Clinton. Based on your voting record, I think you will do a lot of good to help income inequality. I'll hand this interview over to my fellow interviewer, Kent.
Hello, Mrs. Clinton. I'm Kent. I'd like to talk about your views on gun control, a controversial issue in America at this time.
Hi, Kent. I have always been a strong advocate on creating stricter gun control laws.
In the 2000 Senate campaign, you wanted to keep guns off the streets and create a national gun registry. 8 years later, in the 2008 presidential campaign, you were fairly silent on gun control and put yourself in an even more conservative stance than President Obama.
Well, Kent, I'm going to speak out against the uncontrollable use of guns in our country because I think we can do better. We have to take on the gun lobby. 40% of guns are sold at gun shows and over the internet. On top of that, we must close the loophole which permits gun sales without a background check. We have to have a universal background check.
Thank you. I must, however, point out that the loophole you talk about refers to the person-to-person exchange of guns. People who sell firearms for a living must have a federal firearms license, but unlicensed sellers can still sell to a neighbor, friend, or gun show. On top of that, the 40% statistic is from 1994, conducted from only 251 people.
As president, I will take on the gun lobby. What is wrong with us that we cannot stand up to the National Rifle Association and the manufacturers they represent? This is not just tragic. It is infuriating.
As you illustrated, it seems like you maintain a strong advocacy for strict gun laws. You flip-flop a tad to be more appealing, but ultimately I think you will help get guns and military-grade weapons off of the streets. Now that we have covered that, what about your views on the environment? It seems as though you strongly support reducing carbon emissions, but also support domestic drilling, including the dangerous method of fracking.
I have been known to have some of the same stances as Obama on the environment. The science of climate change is unforgiving. Ice caps are melting, sea levels are rising, all wreaking havoc. President Obama released a plan to cut greenhouse pollution and require every state to reduce coal-burning emissions. It is a good plan, and as president, I will defend it.
In 2006 you said that you would side with Republicans by voting in favor of a bill opening new Gulf Coast areas to offshore oil drilling. Also, following further investigations, oil companies were found to donate millions to the Clinton Foundation from companies like ExxonMobil. Can you explain?
Well, I am setting ambitious goals like a 33% increase in the nation's renewable energy source by 2027 and $500 million installed solar panels by 2030.
Well, thanks, Mrs. Clinton. It seems as though you say you are a strong advocate for the environment. I believe you will try and make changes for a cleaner environment, but it can be confusing because you advocate major oil fracking and want to boost fossil fuel supplies, on top of millions of dollars donations suggesting that oil companies are buying the Clintons' influences. I'll let my colleague Nelly handle the rest of this interview.
It's an honor to be here today. My name is Nelly and I'll be continuing the final portion of this interview. Today I'll be focusing on same-sex marriage and your sudden support towards the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community. Why, after a decade of opposing marriage and equality, have you decided to now fully support it? Well, Nelly, the 90s were another era. Just because you are a politician does not mean that you are not a human being. You gather information, think through positions, you're not 100%, thank goodness. You're constantly reevaluating where you stand. One of my big problems now is that too many people never want to change their mind about anything. A lot of Americans are still unsure if you decided to change your positions for political benefit or if you really support it. What would you say to that? I think that I'm an American and I think we have all evolved. It's been one of the fastest, most sweeping transformations I have been aware of. I believe that every loving couple and family deserves to be recognized and treated equally under the law across our nation. No matter what we look like, where we come from, or who we are equally entitled to our human rights. So you think that states should have the power to choose whether or not to support same-sex marriage? It should be required nationwide. In 2014, you stated in an interview with Terry Gross that marriage is a matter left to the states. What caused your shift? Well, some have suggested that gay rights and human rights are separate and distinct, but in fact they are one and the same. Being gay does not make you less human, and that is why gay rights are human rights. Thank you. What can you say to testify against your record of inconsistency, and what is your goal to achieve for the lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender community? Well, I have been very consistent. Over the course of my entire life, I have always fought for the same values and principles, but, like most human beings, including those of us who run for office, I do absorb new information. Our work is not finished until every American can not only marry, but work, live, pray, learn, and raise a family free from discrimination and prejudice. We cannot settle for any less. Thanks, Mrs. Clinton. I do believe that under the right circumstances you would definitely be pro-gay rights. Thank you for the opportunity for my classmates and I to interview you. Thank you. And thank you to your classmates as well. Each and every one of you was an amazing, detailed, and thorough interviewer. I hope your professor recognizes your effort while grading you. You all definitely deserve very high grades. Goodbye.